Good morning, all. This is John Heerdink at Tribe Public. Want to thank all of you for joining us again here today. Many of you are new, and many of you have been with me for a while and started with me at the Tribe over the last 4 years, where we're doing events across the U.S. and approximately 32 cities. Again, thank you for staying with us at the Tribe. And as we've transitioned over to this webinar format because of COVID, hit us in March 2019, as we all know, probably earlier, depending on your speculations, but that's when I effectively shut down the in-person events and started these webinar events. Now we have participants in the Tribe that have gone beyond the US, and we have about 25 countries that are coming in. And just a reminder that our website is tribepublic.com, T-R-I-B-E, public, P-U-B-L-I-C.com. And the thinking is we want to be a conduit, a tool for you to be able to use in order to get in front of the companies that you care about. We do that through the wish list process. It's an ongoing process that you can add to your list at tribepublic.com 24/7, 365. And if we get enough interest, we approach the company's leaders. Primarily, our targets are NYC and NASDAQ listed companies across all sectors, and we look to try to get the collective interests of the Tribe answered by getting the CEOs of these companies on events just like the one today. Today we have INVO Bioscience CEO, Steve Shum, and he is based out of Portland, and we're excited to have him. My full disclosure, I have disclaimers at my website as I and or team members may be investors. In this case, we are a significant investor in INVO Bioscience. It's a company I discovered on my Vista Partners platform, my California registered investment advisor, a couple of years ago now, and began investing in the company. And the company's evolved, and I'm excited to introduce the company to many of you today. As what struck me originally was the massive underserved market that this company is looking to serve. Very few times do you find a market of this size not currently being addressed. It's approximately 95%, depending on the statistics that you look at, of infertility patients that go unserved every year and either opt out or choose not to move forward because of a number of reasons that Steve will speak to today. But they have a treatment, one of 3 ways for someone that's struggling with infertility to be able to get pregnant today. It's a pretty amazing opportunity, I believe. And I'm excited to introduce you to Steve. And Steve, if you will step forward and tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, what brought you to INVO, and then I'll invite you to pull up your PowerPoint. Sure.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone. Appreciate you all taking a little time to learn more about INVO Bioscience today. As a quick background, I initially became involved in INVO back in late 2017 when I actually joined as a board member after being initially introduced to the company. We had just a couple of people on the operating team at that point with extremely limited resources. So all the board members, including myself, were pretty active and hands-on in supporting the team and the overall efforts to build the company. I come from a finance and operations background, and within the public company world, been involved in a few other public companies, unrelated industries. In late 2019, when our then existing CEO was looking to step back from the position, but really still wanted to be involved in supporting the company, the board approached me to assume the role. Having gained a good understanding of the opportunity and what we needed to accomplish to capture that opportunity, I felt comfortable and excited to take on the challenge and continue the work that was already underway. And that was officially in October of 2019 is when I assumed the role. But like I said, I'd been pretty active behind the scenes as a board member, helping the team for the prior 2 years.
Thanks, Steve. Before we pull it up, I just want to remind everybody, the spirit of this is we're going to allow Steve to present for 15-20 minutes. He's going to pull up his PowerPoint. After that, he'll address Q&A for 5-10 minutes. We try to have efficient meetings around 30 plus or so minutes. And along the way now, if you haven't already sent me your questions, many of you have, thank you. please feel free to forward those through the chat feature here at Zoom, and we'll do our best to get those answered if time allows. Thanks again, and look forward to hearing what you have to say, Steve.
Thanks, John. So I've shared my screen. Hopefully that's coming up okay for everyone. Like John said, I'm just going to do a quick review of our corporate investor deck. This is available on our website, and then we'll hopefully have some time for some questions. So, INVO is a medical device company. We developed a device called the InvoCell, which provides an alternative treatment option for patients suffering with infertility. One of the really interesting facts about the fertility market is just how big it is and really how underserved it remains today. There's a huge number of couples that go untreated each year, even here in the US market, where estimates suggest we're only treating around 10 to 15% of the patients in need of advanced fertility care. That dynamic's even worse in other parts of the world, by the way. Globally, estimates suggest there's close to 150 million patients in need, yet we're only performing approximately 2.5 million cycles of IVF each year. And here in the US, that's running around 300,000. So the FDA granted our de novo petition in late 2015, which allowed us to begin US commercialization efforts with the device, and we received our CE mark in late 2019. Again, from an industry standpoint, the fertility market is a large multi-billion-dollar industry now. It's global, it's growing, but as I mentioned, there remains a significant unmet need with a substantial number of couples that go untreated each year. And this is really our focus, to bring a solution and access to affordable care to everyone. Sorry about that. We believe our technology really can address some of the key industry challenges in providing care to those underserved patients. And again, that really represents a major opportunity. In 2019, we signed a pretty significant agreement with an industry leader, a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company called Ferring Pharmaceuticals. They're privately held. And this agreement provided US commercialization rights to Ferring. And since that major agreement, we've signed other agreements in various international markets. As you can see from this slide, the InvoCell is fairly small. It's a medical grade, small plastic device comprised of two parts: an inner vessel designed to hold the eggs and sperm, and the outer chamber that seals and holds that inner vessel. I'm sure many of you have heard of or familiar with in vitro fertilization. With IVF, the eggs and sperm are combined in a dish and then placed in a laboratory incubator for 3 to 5 days. The InvoCell offers an alternative procedure method as compared to conventional IVF. It's an intravaginal culture device and is placed inside the patient's body for that 3 to 5 day period during fertilization and early embryo development. So rather than within a laboratory incubator, which is the case with conventional IVF. So think of our device as a mini incubator that replaces that sophisticated lab incubator. Patient outcomes or success is really the most important issue for patients seeking fertility care, and really the key metric for the industry. Our original FDA clearance on InvoCell was based on a 3-day incubation period. When looking at 3-day incubation, our clinical results demonstrated equivalent success rates to IVF. However, many of our current practitioners out there tend to incubate with our device for 5 days, which has and continues to become more common with conventional IVF. The industry, is unique in that most of the clinics report their patient outcome data into a central database. So we have increasing what we call retrospective or real market usage data that reflects the same type of improvements in outcomes with 5-day incubation that is also seen with 5-day IVF. And this slide here is actually comparing 5-day results. So again, whether you look at 3-day, which was our clinical original clinical data or the real market usage data with 5-day, we've seen very high quality outcomes, comparatively speaking. And again, this comparison here reflects the improved outcomes with 5-day transfers with our device. From an industry standpoint, there's a couple of really key challenges to providing enough access and care to the underserved market, which of course we view as interrelated to each other. One is affordability. IVF tends to be very expensive. Many patients pay out of pocket. Equally important, the industry lacks enough capacity. And on the capacity front, it's both an infrastructure and a people resource issue. And we ultimately, as an industry, need to find ways to drive efficiencies, which is what we believe InvoCell can help provide. From a patient demand standpoint, we've also seen independent studies for the US market that suggests if we could solve this cost or affordability challenge, would likely trigger a pretty meaningful increase in demand for service and potentially really lead to a multi-billion-dollar increase in the industry. And that's just the US market. It's very similar dynamic in many other parts of the world. But again, this is where innovation and technology solutions that can address efficiencies and capacity, like what we believe is the case with InvoCell, will be critical to being able to realize that opportunity from an industry standpoint. Many of our existing clinics offering InvoCell are doing so today at a lower cost. Our technology does facilitate a streamlined procedure method. That includes lower drug stimulation, which helps reduce the need for added patient monitoring. But more importantly, we provide for a reduction in the lab resources in terms of technician time and lab incubator space, all of which enables a lower cost procedure. But again, more importantly, from our standpoint, InvoCell helps increase the volume of patients that can be treated in a clinic. And ultimately, the key goal for us and the clinics is not to replace conventional IVF as a treatment option, but rather offer an additional advanced treatment solution for the underserved patient market and drive expanded care and capacity. That's really the big opportunity as we see it for InvoCell. This also enables a clinic to add a revenue stream by seeing more patients without the need to add much in the way of resources. This slide here just helps provide a visualization of that efficiency effect of our technology on the lab side. Utilizing lab incubators requires, a higher number of people resources and physical footprint than what would be required to support an INVO center. So just to recap the technology and its advantages, again, we have, high quality equivalent success rates as demonstrated by both our early clinical work as well as the growing real world usage evidence. And by the way, when you compare that success rate as measured against the patient cost, we believe we have an industry leading cost per outcome metric, which is important in today's healthcare industry. And we would also note that as usage increases, our real world validation continues to expand, which further reinforces and helps drive overall confidence in our solution. And of course, lastly, the ability to have a more streamlined procedure, we believe we're ultimately adding capacity to the industry, which is something that's desperately needed. So on the commercialization front, we've been pursuing two main transaction types. So one being distribution, as we did here in the US with our partner Ferring, as well as joint venture or partnership opportunities. And that's a more recent activity I'll spend a little time on. We also look at the market in terms of the different channel opportunities. Bringing InvoCell into existing IVF clinics is where we initially started. And with our commercialization efforts, it's where our key current distributors are focused. The implementation is pretty straightforward, but it also does require those clinical practices to adopt an additional process within their longstanding existing processes, which can take time and perhaps, maybe even more importantly, many of the underserved patients are often not walking into these practices is they're already aware of the high cost of IVF. So as we've evolved our go-to-market strategy, we also see a couple of other important channel opportunities, which include creating a new clinic, which is dedicated to offering INVO as the preferred treatment solution. And this is something we're pursuing with the joint venturing activities. And second, working out the implementation approach to bringing our solution into the larger network of OBGYN practices. So both of these additional channels are something we're pursuing. We believe will be an important part of our efforts to really advance InvoCell to this large potential patient market and really help democratize care in this industry. So as I mentioned, from a commercialization standpoint, we signed this agreement with Ferring in early 2019. That really began a more aggressive effort with our commercialization efforts. Ferring is a leader in women's healthcare. Under the exclusive arrangement with Ferring, they're in charge of the US market, gave us a world-class partner. We received a $5 million upfront licensing payment upon executing that agreement, as well as we have an opportunity to earn an additional $3 million milestone payment based on achieving a regulatory label enhancement for 5-day incubation here in the US for our device, which is something we're working on. We also, as part of this agreement, we still control manufacturing of the device, and Ferring is required to purchase annual minimum quantities each year, which increased throughout the initial 7-year term of the agreement. The exclusive agreement covers just the US market, and one of the other key elements to the agreement is we're allowed under this partnership arrangement with Ferring to establish a certain limited number of dedicated INVO-only clinics. And most recently, we entered into an amendment with Ferring here just about a month and a half ago, where we essentially adjusted last year's minimum quantities, and they gave us a final purchase order related to last year. But they also gave us some added flexibility to further develop out the dedicated INVO centers here in the US. Upon completing that Ferring agreement, we really began adding to our internal resources with the goal of supporting Ferring's efforts here in the US, developing our INVO-only clinics, and then really reaching outside the US towards international markets. We've signed a number of distribution agreements in several countries. And most recently, we've started to see some orders coming in from these new regions. I would just note that we do need to work through various regulatory hurdles to register our device in these foreign countries before we and the partners can begin commercialization. That process has taken longer, especially with the impacts of COVID in many of these regions, but several of the markets have recently completed that process, and we're working through the balance of these countries as well. On the joint venture front, we've entered into agreements in India, Mexico, and most recently our first here in the US. We have teamed up with partners that will, under these arrangements, we've teamed up with partners. They'll operate the clinics, and we're really providing the technology and financial support. For us, this is a really exciting area of development as it creates one of these new channels I mentioned earlier. And we think this effort will be extremely beneficial to our overall development, including patient awareness and overall adoption of InvoCell by having these dedicated centers out there. It has taken a while to formulate the strategy around this effort. We've been talking about it for a while, but I would say it's just more recently, we see really the momentum starting to pick up the pace here on these activities. But it took a while to work out the details, identify initial key partners, work out some of the initial planning around this. But we feel we finally have some visibility regarding timing and outlook toward these initial clinics, and we do expect the first couple to become operational in the second half of this year, including the US and our Mexico operation. And by the way, I'd note that today we did file an 8K where essentially establishing our newest partnership for a second operation here in the US. And that clinic is expected to be based out of Santa Cruz in sort of Northern California. And the business development team, continues to have active discussions both here in the US and many other parts of the world. And we're optimistic we will see additional agreements come together this year. So I won't read all the details on all these partnership slides, but again, this deck is available for you on our website. And again, as one of the other additional channel strategies, we do believe our technology can be brought into the OBGYN practice network. We're working out some of those details, and we expect to have more to report on this in the near future. And again, just to recap on the joint venture and partnership activities, again, our goal here is to really partner with a physician. They run the practice, they're handling all the patient management activities, and we're providing technology and training and ultimately financial support. And then these efforts are allowing us to really benefit in the revenue flow of the clinic. So it moves us to participate in a bigger piece of the economics on a per procedure basis rather than just selling our device. Moving to our regulatory and clinical strategy, as I mentioned earlier, our original FDA clearance was based on 3-day incubation, and that's what our product is labeled and marketed under currently. However, most of our current practitioners out there are doing 5-day transfers, so it's really important that we expand our actual labeling to encompass 5-day incubation. Our Ferring agreement, as I mentioned, also provides for a $3 million milestone payment upon completing that. We had designed a small prospective study in the beginning of 2020, but recruitment and moving that forward was severely impacted by COVID. However, during 2020, the additional real-world usage data that became available has afforded us an opportunity to pursue this label expansion utilizing retrospective data. And I would say we are very optimistic in that approach and look forward to reporting further updates this year. We recently reported our 2020 year-end results. Total revenues for last year were approximately $1,037,000, which compared to $1,480,000 in the prior year. As we noted in our earnings release, our U.S. partner placed a final 2020 order for $501,000 in order to satisfy the amended annual minimum requirements for last year. But the actual recognition of that order will occur in the first quarter of this new year. Excluding non-cash charges related to equity-based expenses and the amortization of our convertible debt discount, we had an adjusted EBITDA loss last year of approximately $3.74 million, and that compared to the prior year loss of $1.5 million. That was consistent with our internal plan as we've added to our infrastructure in 2020 in order to execute our strategic initiatives. Also, just a quick couple key balance sheet highlights. As a result of our end of year public offering last year and uplisting to NASDAQ, we closed the year with approximately $10.1 million in cash. Subsequent to the year end, we had about $1.2 million of our remaining convertible debt outstanding convert into common shares. So as of now, we have just a remaining $500,000 in convertible debt. We have approximately 10.4 million shares outstanding, roughly 11.8 million fully diluted, assuming convertible debt, warrants, and vested options were all converted or exercised. And I'll just kind of conclude here real quick with a quick recap. We're in a large and growing global market. There is a very significant underserved and unmet market opportunity. Our device is approved. We're gaining traction and awareness along with growing clinical and commercial validation. We believe we're solving some really key industry challenges to helping to open up access to this massive amount of patients in need of a solution. And I would just say, speaking for the whole INVO team, we're incredibly excited as we look to the near term opening of our first dedicated INVO centers and having seen those become operational, as well as, again, just the growing awareness that's unfolding for InvoCell within the infertility industry. So, John, I'll turn it back to you if you want to throw some questions out.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. Very interesting. Just a reminder, everybody online here, some of you have already sent some of your questions over via the Zoom chat feature. Please feel free to do so. Do the best to get some or all of these answered. If we don't, we'll get Steve back on at some point. The reminder too is that once sometime today, I'll get the video of this event up at the Tribe Public YouTube channel. If you haven't been there already, just search for Tribe Public and it'll pull up that channel. We'll have that posted so you can review and or push that over to others that may have not been able to be on today. Thanks again for attending. So the first question I have here is sort of a follow-on to the joint venture model. One, can you speak to that a little bit more clearly, how you are participating in Mexico versus the US versus the one in Birmingham versus Santa Cruz? What is the model? And by the way, can you tie in what struck me about the model that I understood before you going down this joint venture route is that you were not having to add a large footprint of employees. You're using partners, leveraging distributorships, joint ventures, et cetera, here and around the world, and therefore would allow you to not build out a massive sales force and alternatively support these groups while through marketing, either online or otherwise, to build understanding and key opinion leaders, et cetera. But can you speak to this model, and maybe also tie in specifically in North America, what your plans are this year and beyond?
Sure, there's a few questions in there. Let me start with maybe our internal resources and our team. We have expanded our team, but we're still relatively small. We're around 15, 16 people internally in the team. We use a few outside consultants and advisors that we're leveraging from as well. We don't envision having to dramatically increase our team as expansion unfolds from here, because to your point, John, our goal is to partner up on these activities, and the partner is really managing the clinic and the operations, and we're providing, again, support and really financial support primarily. To the extent that some of these arrangements, we might be a little more involved in helping to actually operate the lab, we would still look to do that on more of a contract kind of basis, if you will. So again, where we can kind of manage that based on, the level of business it's doing, so we don't have to incur heavy fixed costs, if you will, to our internal infrastructure. So we like that model. We think that's going to provide a lot of leverage as we start growing the top line from here. So I just want to first say that again, the market has seen us expand our internal cost infrastructure, but we don't really see much in the way of increases as we move forward from here. There'll be maybe some variable increases, but that'll be commensurate with the revenue growth from here. But from a fixed standpoint, we feel like we'll sort of level that off as we move forward from here. As it relates to the specific structure of some of these arrangements, each clinic's a little bit different. It's a function of what we had to negotiate with the partner. So each one does have a little different characteristic to it. For example, Mexico, we are a 1/3 partner. We have 2 other partners with us in that venture. Whereas in Birmingham, Alabama, that we announced here recently, we're a 50-50 partner in that venture. And then today's announcement, which is not really a joint venture, it's a partnership agreement with the group for Santa Cruz. We're effectively a 40% partner, but the way that one really works is they own the clinic 100%. We actually own the lab 100%, but then we're essentially splitting procedure revenue on a 60-40 basis. So that's the mechanism to that one. And as far as how, some probably have a question of how that's going to impact our P&L. Again, it'll be a little bit different. For example, with Santa Cruz, we'll be consolidating obviously 100% of that lab activity, and the portion that's coming to the lab will be, again, 100% P&L impact to us. Birmingham, we're a 50-50 partner, but it's very likely we'll be consolidating the results. That's not a certainty just yet. We'll have to wait for auditors to confirm, but the likelihood is we'll be consolidating that operation within our P&L 100%. And Mexico, because of our 1/3 ownership, that might be a situation where we're just doing a single line adjustment to our P&L for our 1/3 carried interest in the operation. So again, it'll be a little different depending on each clinic. The key point is we're participating in a much bigger piece of the revenue pie with these activities, and a much bigger piece of the profit opportunity with these activities. So it'll lend itself to really just us overall participating in a bigger way to the expansion of this market with our technology. And that's what we're very excited about, because I'll go back to the point of this is a very big unmet market opportunity. There's a huge patient population out there that goes unserved. It lends itself in addition to us, just overall for the industry, an opportunity to see significant expansion in the gross dollars that are generated in this industry. And we think we can be a meaningful part in that expansion effort of this industry. Our objective is not to replace or as provide an alternative to conventional IVF. Our objective is to provide care with another advanced infertility treatment methodology to help that underserved patient market that goes underserved today.
Gotcha. Thank you, Steve. Going back to sort of a question I asked you on your earnings call recently, specific in regards to the Birmingham joint venture. One of the things that I think is curious and one should understand is the cost around setting up these clinics and the footprint and how you're going to be dealing with that, because many of the questions are centered around your balance sheet and the cash that you have on here. I think you reported $10.1 million at the end of the year with your latest filings. And can you speak to that, the cost around the joint venture, cash on hand, et cetera, and how you see it taking you forward?
Yeah, so again, every clinic will be a little different depending on how big we're going to build the footprint. But as it relates to Birmingham specifically, I think we indicated that we'd expect the initial build out and startup cost to probably be around $500,000. And then we'll provide some operating support to bring it to profitability. But we're pretty optimistic, just given that group and their success with working with InvoCell in a prior clinic, that they will move pretty quickly to achieving enough volume to actually quickly bring that clinic to a break-even point. So not a huge hurdle from a upfront investment to make it operational. The structure of how that arrangement works is we'll provide that capital in a form of a promissory note that profits of the clinic, a third of the profits of the clinic actually come back to us in the form of a repayment on that note. So essentially our costs are recouped out of profits of the clinic, and then on an ongoing basis, we retain a 50% interest in profitability of the clinic ongoing. So as we mentioned on our earnings call, we felt that, based on the expected average cost per procedure revenue they expect to charge, that we probably need to see about 250 annual cycles per year in that clinic to be in the black, profitable. And when you compare that to the kind of volumes they were doing in their previous clinic, I mean, they had individual months where they were doing 60 and 70 patients in the month. So, and this footprint we're building is actually going to be a little bigger. We figure capacity-wise, this clinic could handle 2,000 cycles a year doing INVO. The average IVF clinic out there runs, just shy of about 600 cycles per year, but you have clinics that are very large doing much more than that. You have very small clinics, but the average IVF center, when you look across all the centers and the volume of IVF cycles, they're, call it an average clinic's doing about 600. So we think, a hurdle of 250 to be profitable with an upward bound of 2,000. If this clinic is, anywhere close to what an average IVF clinic does, it's going to be very nicely profitable operation.
Gotcha. And then could you take that to the next level? The question is around, with the assumption that there's a 95% of patients go unserved, how would you look at adding InvoCell centers to be able to serve that underserved market? What is, is it 1 per 100,000, people? How do you look at that?
Well, the great thing about INVO is because of the efficiencies and the flow that and what you would actually have to do to expand existing clinics. For example, Birmingham, to go beyond 2,000 cycles would be pretty de minimis to be able to expand it. Versus if you had an IVF clinic that was maxed out, the expenditures they'd have to incur to be able to add more patients are much more significant. So the way we see it, John, is that we don't necessarily think we have to put, multiple centers in large population areas. We believe we can get away with, a single center servicing a fairly large area. And as awareness expanded and, patient volume grew, we'd simply just be able to expand that particular center, without, again, needing to, put additional centers nearby. So we view it as just strategically locate centers in various locations. Now, remember, under our here in the U.S., under our Fairing Agreement, we initially can do 7, and then once we do the initial 7, we'll have to seek their consent to expand beyond that. But of course, we fundamentally believe that as we bring the first, these first clinics operational, we believe our partner will probably support. They just want to make sure those go smoothly. They're doing well. They're enhancing the awareness of INVO. We think that we have a good partner. We think they'll be accommodative to further expanding.
And speaking of your partner, how do they, in Fairing in the U.S. here, how do they participate in these clinics mostly?
Yeah, so it's been what we're doing to help them as a good partner. They teamed up with us to try to help bring greater awareness and greater volume InvoCell. And so the way we look at these centers is that we're trying to do the same thing, obviously, for our own technology, but we're also asking our partners that if they're going to be utilizing drugs for the patient that are drugs that are category drugs that are within Fairing's portfolio, that they exclusively use Fairing's drugs. So, we feel like these centers are also a benefit to our partner Fairing. So it's a nice symbiotic opportunity. Of course, it's the clinician's decision. They handle all patient decisions. But again, if they're using a class of drug that's within Fairing's portfolio, they're agreeable to utilizing Fairing's drugs.
Got it. And I believe Fairing controls about 80% of the world's fertility drug market at the same time. It's a de facto that many clinicians use, being the case. Is that true?
Yeah, their gonadotropin drug is well known. They're definitely a leader in that category. Drugs for one of the key fertility drugs. So Absolutely. I mean, and again, remember why they did this, why they signed this agreement with us originally is that they too saw this really significant unmet, need out there, a large underserved patient market. So for them, they saw our device as really a facilitator to helping to unlock that underserved patient market and expand their opportunities as well.
Okay. And to be fair, looking at the Birmingham situation, AIRM, who was doing 600 to 700, why do you think that you can possibly expand that to 2,000 there over time? By the way, I think if you do the math on the low end, you're looking at if they charge 5,000, even on the low end of 600, that's still a $3 million business. Can you also tie in sort of the margins around that, a clinic like this, if that's the case, and then speak to why you think 2,000 might be a rational number to be able to grow into?
Yeah, we think. I mean, again, we'll have better clarity as we get it, bring it operational. But what we've worked out on paper with our partner, again, they're very experienced. They've run a clinic before. This clinic they were previously involved in was predominantly using InvoCell, so they're well versed in how to make that the main methodology treatment option. We view that once they reach that break even number of cycles, because they've got their fixed costs, but the incremental margin contribution, once they're above that profitability line, we feel is going to be in excess of 30 to 35% to the bottom line on incremental profit margin. So it'll be, like I said, very nicely profitable. As far as confidence in their ability to do, sufficient volume, again, they've been there and done it before already. They've demonstrated success at attracting enough patients to be, averaging, 500-600 cycles a year. Our intent is to actually come in and provide additional marketing support. I mean, they do a decent job. They do a good job of what they do currently in their marketing approach to attract patients. And remember, their prior clinic in Birmingham was attracting patients from all over the country. They had been tracking that they had patients come into their clinic from over 22 different states around the country seeking the price advantage that they were offering for InvoCell. So, of course, some of that travel with coming into the clinic was pre-COVID, but the point is that they were out in the social media circles, offering InvoCell, offering what price point they would, provide it at, and they had really good demand coming in from all over the place. And so our objective is they'll do those same things with this clinic, but our plan is to really stack on top of that a whole additional marketing game plan to help supercharge that, if you will, and further drive additional volumes to the clinic. So as you know, John, you and I have talked about this a lot. This is one area that InvoCell, as we were building out our team last year, we were still missing, some gaps in marketing. And so we've just recently started filling in those particular gaps. And it's critically important we do that too, because we want to help these new clinics that are about to become operational in helping them provide, have some standardization in how they're, messaging InvoCell, marketing materials, things like that. So we're helping to create that, but we're also going to go out and help them implement things to help build awareness and drive patients into their clinic. So we're going to expend some resources on marketing initiatives specifically to help our partners.
Thank you. A follow-on to that is, again, if correct me if I'm wrong, but at ARM it was a clinic that was a mixed clinic. It wasn't InvoCell only clinic, although they were very successful with their initiatives with InvoCell. I believe you're looking at expanding and having this in maybe more than one room. I think it was primarily done out of one clinician, one room sort of situation at ARM, and that might give you this ability to expand from the 600-700 to 2,000 because you have this dedicated only clinic. You have multiple clinicians moving towards that. in addition to this marketing effort. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, as I said, I mean, we're with our partner plan to build a little bit bigger, facility or capability than what they had in the previous clinic. So that's exactly right, John, that it'll afford them the opportunity to be able to treat even more patients. But even in that smaller footprint in their prior clinic, Karen would tell you that she felt they could have been capable of doing close to 1,000 cycles. So, I wouldn't say that what we're planning in this facility is, twice the size. Again, this speaks to the efficiencies of InvoCell. It's a little bit bigger than what they had previously, but it'll be capable of doing, we estimate 2,000. So.
Okay. And let me ask you this on the INVO, how would you compare to an IVF clinic, an INVO clinic of the future here? How would you compare those two?
I'm sorry, John, just.
How would you compare INVO cell-only clinics versus to an IVF clinic today? Is in any way that is there any fair comparisons?
Well, again, I would say, we see the importance of ultimately wanting to build our technology within existing IVF practices, but we've certainly seen that process go a little slower than we would like. And, we feel that part of what's happening here is that, remember, in existing IVF practices, they're already very busy. They often see all the patient volume they can currently handle. And they've got kind of their process and procedures down to a science. They've been doing it for a long time. Some of these clinics have been around for 20, 30 years, literally. And so when you bring a new technology into that setting, they've got to, adopt some additional procedures. They're now also trying, they may see it as an opportunity to, target an additional patient population, but they've got to figure out, how do I bring that patient population into our clinic? And so it's just been a slower process for a number of reasons, which is why we feel that, again, these standalone clinics, they're divorced of that legacy, if you will, and those existing procedures. They're brand new clinics set up to really, INVO is the only solution they're offering. And so that, allows it to, these clinics implement their process and procedures around our technology. They're solely targeting the patient to track towards our technology. So we think that is why, one of the reasons we keep saying we think this is going to be a very significant piece to accelerating commercialization is because these dedicated centers will be able to help, build awareness really to the patient population out there that a solution exists, it's affordable, it has high quality outcomes. And we think that what will happen over time, it will actually help the legacy clinics see that patient population more comfortable coming into their clinics and seeking that, our particular solution. And it'll just help drive awareness and flow into the legacy clinics. So we think it's going to be a good symbiotic sort of dynamic in the marketplace that will be instrumental in driving acceleration and adoption of the technology. And it's why we feel it's so critical to our bigger success of bringing these initial operations online.
Okay.
And that's why we're also equally very excited that these initial clinics are on the near horizon to becoming operational. We stated our goal of having the first clinics operational in the second half of the year. We think a couple of them probably in the early part of the second half of this year. And if you think about it, John, that's not too far off in the future. That's pretty close in. And as we work through some of the implementation pieces and have a little more clarity on opening dates on the first couple clinics, we will provide those additional details to the market so they can look forward to knowing when these first couple of clinics will in fact be opening their doors and starting to treat patients.
Okay, great. In addition to that, I believe you said stated recently you look to get 3 to 5 agreements in place in the US alone this year. You've got Birmingham, that's one. As of this morning, you've announced Santa Cruz, or at least 8K'd it. that sounds like.
Just to clarify, what we said is we felt we set an objective of bringing the first 3 to 5 clinics operational this year.
Okay.
We knew what we had at the time we said that in hand. We had Birmingham, we had Mexico. We felt they were definitely moving down the path of becoming operational this year. And of course, we knew, like on Santa Cruz, we were getting close to finalizing. And we've got some other opportunities that we're working on. So, we felt comfortable stating an objective of bringing the first 3 to 5 clinics operational by the end of this year, and we still feel good about that.
Okay, great. To carry on from your last point, before there was a follow-up question around how many people or how many physicians in these IVF clinics have been trained to date in the U.S. You've offered a number before. Do you know?
So Ferring runs a website, InvoCell.com. It was our domain, but we gave it to Ferring to provide, a location to provide education to training or education materials for patients as well as physicians. And on that site, they manage a part of the site that shows all the existing IVF clinics that are offering InvoCell. And so it's around, last number I think was around 130 or 140 clinics are on that location map, if you will, for that site. So that's the rough number that have been trained on InvoCell here in the U.S.
Got it. Okay.
And that's the legacy clinic, or what I call it. Not legacy is maybe not the right term, but the existing IVF practices out there.
Yeah, and then you've sold the seeds out there in a sense, or at least your partner Ferring has done this with quite a good number of physicians out there aware of this, trained on it, can offer it. At the same time, as we mentioned earlier, and I believe some of you may have seen a Today show commentary about infertility coming out of COVID. One of the physicians actually here in the Bay Area said she's 100 deep in seeing patients. And so there's a pent-up demand, but there's this ongoing, just ongoing need of this underserved population that just can't get in. And this has just been magnified during the whole process as the world is opening up again.
Well, yeah, and remember that the number one significant factor in infertility is age, right? So those that have decided they want to seek fertility treatment often know that age is a big factor. And so when you have a situation like COVID that many clinics, stopped seeing new patients for a period of time, you sort of back up the train a little bit of people wanting to, get on with seeking their fertility treatments. So because as time goes on, it becomes even more challenging if they're already struggling. So age is a big factor. The other thing that I think is also interesting to note that's putting upward demand pressure overall on the industry, or upward demand for service on the industry, are the continuing evolution of insurance and financial incentive trends out there. So you've seen private carriers that provide insurance solutions to large corporations to be able to provide fertility benefits to their employees. That's been growing very nicely. That's adding to demand in the industry. You see public insurance continuing to expand, maybe slowly, and again, there's still a lot of patients that pay for this out of pocket. But again, we keep saying is insurance and financial incentives continues to increase, which only further adds to, again, that demand equation. So you already have a large underserved patient market. If you remember, one of the challenges in the industry is affordability, but if you're helping deal with the affordability element, that's one issue. Mm-hmm. But again, the bigger issue out there in our minds is also the capacity constraint problem for the industry. There's just not enough of these IVF centers out there, even in the United States. There's limitation on the people resources to manage these clinics, especially in the laboratory side of things. So this industry definitely needs to solve those challenges, particularly on the capacity side with efficiencies. And that's one of the great things about InvoCell is we've demonstrated that efficiency. And again, that goes back, look at the example we pointed out on the Birmingham clinic previously. This was a practice that initially started as an IVF practice, and based on their very small footprint and limited people resources, figured they could handle a certain number of IVF cycles. When they moved to an predominantly INVO only model within their clinic, they were literally able to, see in excess of 5x the number of patients through their clinic with no increase in physical footprint or people resources. So we feel we have really good evidence and validation in a real clinical setting that we can help solve some of the capacity issues in the industry.
Okay.
One of our directors, Dr. Kevin Duty, runs his own IVF practice, and he would tell you that one of the great things about INVO from his vantage point is, even though he's a conventional IVF practice, is that he offers INVOCell as a mechanism to actually increase the number of patients. He figures he could see anywhere from 30 to 40% more patients through his clinic without having to add any resources to his infrastructure. So, maybe not all conventional IVF clinics have come to that realization because they haven't necessarily integrated the solution within their practices just yet. But that's where we obviously want to see the conventional practice market go, is realize that, again, it serves as an opportunity to treat more patients through their practice and help really, again, treat that underserved patient through their practice, without having to expand their practice footprint.
Okay, thank you. Can you speak to, switching gears a little bit, can you speak to the IP, and is there an IP strategy that you might take on or have taken on with add-on patents, et cetera? How would you, in North America and around the world?
Yeah, so our primary patent, which was issued long ago, is still valid through 2024. What we've also done is, when we started working towards the label enhancement for 5-day, we made some, through feedback of our customers over time, we've made some very slight improvements to the device. You can see from the picture, it's a fairly simple device, but there are some things we felt we could improve upon, and we did. And that lended itself to basically writing a new patent on the device to cover both that modification as well as for the 5-day incubation period. And we have already submitted that new patent application. It's pending, so it'll take some time to work its way through, but we have officially filed new IP on the device.
Okay. Recently, you filed a shelf. Switching gears back to the balance sheet. Can you speak to that, why you did that, and how it might be used?
Sure. I mean, let me just, first say we don't have any immediate or specific plans right now. We thought this would be an important type of tool to put in place to have available to provide for potential optionality and future flexibility to help accelerate our growth. It's valid for 3 years. Our clinical activities are something we see as very important to driving value in the business, and our ability to help fund the startup of those is very beneficial economically speaking. Those efforts could accelerate once we bring these initial ones operational. So we'd want to look at the most attractive method to facilitate such expansion. We don't have to do it through the use of a shelf, but that could be the best method to do so. The key point for us is that creating shareholder value is our top priority, and having additional options to find the most attractive cost of capital that adds to shareholder value is a goal of ours. And I'd also make the argument that we believe, expansion capital with a specific purpose and a clear return profile, like we believe these clinics can provide, is essentially anti-dilutive to shareholders, because then it allows us to build a bigger company more quickly. So.
It's pretty common practice at the end of the day. I mean, any emerging growth company of any sort today, it's common practice to put these in place to be in a capital efficient manner if you do choose to raise capital or opportunistically acquire, et cetera, move forward. I've seen it, and it does allow you to access the markets in a way that more efficiently. The last thing in the 8K this morning, you did also had a footnote, another note, and say that you had, prior to you getting involved, Steve, as the CEO, there was another California effort that had been trying to move forward. Can you speak to that quickly, and then as you move forward, how things have, why are they going in the direction they're going at this point?
Well, yeah, we had intended to move that earlier project forward in the Bay Area, but the partner shifted some of their focus and requirements. So we kind of collectively decided to pull back from that effort. Honestly, it was probably a good thing for us as well, as we realized that we still needed, to do a little more evaluation and detailed work on and planning on our side, to make sure that we had a good handle on these activities and the best way to establish them and so forth. So, again, I think it was ultimately beneficial for us as well to have pushed back from that one. And like we said in the 8K, we had been working with this other partner, we've been speaking with this other partner for quite some time in the Bay Area as well. And again, fair amount of planning went into working out how to best proceed, making sure they were really bought into our concept and what we wanted to do. So we feel good about today, the new partner. I really look at the prior, like I said, intention as helpful. I think it was helpful in us sort of learning, if you will. I mean, sometimes when things don't come to pass within a company, that's not a bad thing. That's actually probably a good thing. It allowed us to learn, have a better handle on what we wanted and what we wanted in a partner and things like that. So we're going to focus on building, this operation in the Bay Area with this new group. They're incented to potentially expand that concept in a couple of additional markets with us. Not unlike, by the way, we put a mechanism in place with the partners in Birmingham to also expand the Birmingham concept. So what's great, with these initial partnerships is we may not necessarily need to go out and look for new partners. We can just look to work with our existing partners to then replicate the template, if you will, that we've established with them, and then their known quantities as well for us. So it doesn't mean we won't work with new partners, it just means there's going to be an opportunity to expand it in multiple ways by either working with existing partners or also seeking new partners.
Got it. Thank you. Well, Steve, I think we've answered many of the questions, and I'm sorry if I didn't get to all of them in this one, but we held you guys over 2x what we normally do here. I do appreciate it's the first time we've had you on, and so selfish wanted you to go into a little bit more depth, and look forward to getting you back on as you progress. I want to thank all of the members of the tribe for joining today. I really appreciate your efforts, and continue to send us the names. And if you want Steve back on and INVO Bioscience back on, again, their symbol is NASDAQ INVO. Just continue to express through the wish list or send me a message or call. I'm open to all, and I really appreciate it. Note, this video will be up on the Tribe Public channel here today. I'll do my best, and once I get the recording in from Zoom, and we'll go from there. Anything you would add at the end here, Steve?
I appreciate you setting this up, and we really appreciate everybody that participated and took the time to listen. As John mentioned, if any of you have follow-up, don't hesitate to reach out to us or reach out to our IR group. Happy to coordinate follow-up calls with folks. And again, stay tuned. We're very excited about what's in front of us.
All right. Thanks again. Have a great rest of the week, and good luck in the future year.
Thank you.